book was more of the more practical lessons, and more on a day-to-day basis what you could do for your own company or yourself to create an environment of innovation. And the biggest challenge of innovation is to sustain. The basic principles are, number one is that the company, your organization, has to be product focused. Everything you do is based on creating the best product in the world, and day by day to improve upon it, knowing what the user is going to need. I think the important thing that in the principles of Apple is that you tried to create what you thought the user was going to need rather than a lot of work on finding out what users wanted. I think that's a big difference. And then to have everything you do is based on this ability to make it better, and the ability to make not only the product better, but to make the company better, the organization better, how you recruit people, how you communicate with people, how you treat people, and on a day-to-day basis to make sure that everybody is very in tune with each other. Teamwork is incredibly important. Be able to work in small groups, and not be so concerned about the financial abilities that you have, but more on the ability to make the best product in the world. Technology is being commoditized. So today, all the technology that we're getting in our hands is basically a commoditization of technology down to that level. We basically are going in a whole different direction, because once I put it in your hands, it becomes sort of invisible to you that what it really is. I mean, you become so used to using the technology that it becomes just a way of life. What I was upset about the Isaacson book was that I felt that it was very negative. And most people read the books think Steve was a jerk, and I really felt that was totally not who he was. Steve was a very loner. Steve was not a person who had a lot of friends or spent a lot of time, socializing with a lot of people. So I think he had a sort of part of him which was highly committed to making Apple as successful, making products as successful. So I think his energy level was based on that direction. Steve, to me, was a forward kind of person. Steve was a guy that was not easy to deal with, but on the other hand, if you understood that his intensity was totally directed to making the best products in the world and taking this technology to better people's lives, you would understand his intensity to make it happen. I also believe, and he knew that several years ago he was going to die, and I believe he accelerated significant amount of products, technology, and what he wanted Apple to become, because he knew he was going to die. And I think that I felt that the Isaacson book didn't really capture the most important telltale sign of who Steve Jobs was. Is when he died, that people around the world went to the store, they bought his product, and put wreaths, notes, flowers at his doorstep. I thought that's symbolic of who Steve was. It was really a shock to me when he died. Even though we all knew he was going to die, it was a moment in time that the reality finally had settled in. And I feel that since Steve has died, that the Apple legacy has continued on with Apple itself, and also within myself. I feel that I continue on this great opportunity for leadership that Steve sort of instilled in me. And instilled in me to create new things, create a new company, and so I think it's gone on. His memory is still very much alive. I believe that if you go today, look at an Apple store, if you look at Apple products, Steve is still there. I mean, I think he left probably a 3-year roadmap, I believe, of products that he left when he left the earth, and I think that we're still on that track. When I got fired from Apple, I felt that I had to be on my own, and I think that I really learned a lesson to who I was at the same time. And so my relationship with Steve, we'd gone in totally different directions. I was often doing my own thing in my own company. He was off in those days into Next and Pixar, so we're in totally different directions. The brilliance of him, I think, was the part that always would amaze me, and I think this is the part that most people didn't realize about Steve, or Silicon Valley understand. I mean, he was like a rock star. He was in a whole different world. He had a whole different language, and I think that a lot of times that language would sort of get him in trouble. One of the phrases he used to always say, "Never trust anybody over 40 years old." And we were at a meeting once, and a bunch of the Silicon Valley CEO meetings, and Steve was, and they were talking about Silicon Valley, and Steve was frustrated that he felt that the the valley really wasn't keeping up with the current technologies to help users. And Steve said, the problem with all of you, you're all over 40 years old, and you should never trust anybody over 40 years old. And Andy Grove got very upset about it. That time he was the CEO of Intel, and Steve said, "You guys don't get it. I mean, you're going to miss the opportunity here for some great technological changes, and you're going to miss the window to do it." And now, if you look back at it today, he was right. I mean, Hewlett Packard is on the verge of, are they going to survive or not? One company after the other in Silicon Valley has not done well, even including. At that time, IBM was dominant, Hewlett Packard was dominant, and look where they are today. He did not have much of a private life, and that was, he'd gone through, one girlfriend after the other, but he was sort of looking at the wrong, he was always enamored by showbiz, and he liked showbiz women, but that never worked out for him. And so his private life was virtually zero because he was so devoted and so committed about Apple itself. He lived his life the way he was when he had $10 is when he had $10 million. And I think that was really evident in the way his life operated. There wasn't any problems outside of Apple itself that he had to face with. In fact, as I said, Steve never carried money. So whenever you went to dinner with Steve, I would tell everybody, make sure you bring money because you're going to pay. It wasn't about that he didn't want to pay for it. It's just that money wasn't part of his life. We all knew that. I mean, from the first day I met Steve, I knew that he had a daughter. Her name was Lisa, which is where the Apple computer Lisa came from. He had an affair with a young college student, and he never did anything about it. He didn't know what to do about it. I mean, he didn't take the responsibility, I would say, of admitting he was the father and then supporting her financially until later. In a economic crisis that we have in the world today, we actually need that. I believe that this is a great opportunity to start up something new, to start up something that perhaps the old way isn't working. And I think it's an opportunity actually to make something happen better. I was just talking to a person in a company that had a company that was going through the same problem. Mm-hmm. So I said, what you should do is you should start up a small group and then you name them something different, but separate them from the company so that they can get sort of like what I call a skunk works or another opportunity to get something going. But otherwise, you end up in the scrap heap, and I think that's what's happening in the world today. We are bound by the way it has been in the past, which isn't going to work in the future, and we got to somehow break out of that. So I think today is the greatest opportunity to make change. It's the hardest time to do it, but I think it's the greatest opportunity. I think the world today, I think the attitude of even the people in the world, even the Italians or the people, the Americans, you have to have a different attitude. You just can't have it given to you every day. I mean, we did a big course correction 2 years ago when the world economy collapsed, and we all got to make changes now. And I think now is a great opportunity to assess who you are, what's going on in your operation, and what can you do to make it better. I think you'd be more successful doing that than doing nothing.